Prior to 1960, developmental psychology and society operated on a rigid assumption. Adulthood was a single, massive block of life that began the moment you turned 18. At that exact birthday, the societal trigger was pulled. You were expected to leave the family home, secure full-time employment, and enter a rapid marriage. That timeline is obsolete. Today, demographic data shows the average age of true independence, meaning a person lives entirely autonomously and pays all their own financial obligations, is 27. This timeline illustrates a severe demographic split hidden within that 27-year average. Women achieve full residential and financial independence at an average age of 21. Men do not hit that identical milestone until an average age of 34. Developmental psychology does not view this delay as a generational failure. It is an adaptive necessity. To accommodate the demands of a highly technical economy, the period from 18 to 40 is now split into two distinct phases: emerging adulthood, where identity and resources are built, and established adulthood, focused on securing a permanent niche. The modern lifespan has elongated to accommodate the sheer complexity of contemporary life. To understand why we require this multi-year runway, we have to look at the specific biological, cognitive, and economic mechanics driving the delay. Between the ages of 25 and 35, the human body hits its absolute biological peak. Cardiac function, physical strength, and manual coordination operate at maximum output. Yet this period contains a glaring paradox. Despite operating at peak organic resilience, emerging adults are statistically at their most vulnerable to severe, life-ending health crises. This chart graphs the intersection of organic health and mortality rates. Because young adults operate under an illusion of permanent health, their primary causes of mortality are purely behavioral rather than organic, specifically accidents, homicides, and suicides. The specific behavioral risks are actively shifting. While current generational data shows a significant drop in binge drinking, that decrease is offset by sharp increases in cannabis consumption and the misuse of prescription medications. Survival during this peak depends on navigating a specific cognitive gap, managing high-risk behavioral choices while the brain's regulatory architecture is still coming online. That cognitive maturation is anchored in the prefrontal cortex, which does not complete its neural integration until approximately age 25. As this integration finishes, the brain makes a vital leap from rigid adolescent dichotomies into post-formal thought, the cognitive framework required to navigate the ambiguities of the adult world. This visualizes Kramer's stages. First, absolutism assumes every problem possesses one clear answer. Exposure fractures that rigidity into relativism, realizing answers depend entirely on context. Finally, dialectical reasoning synthesizes blatant contradictions into a coherent whole, accepting ambiguity without discarding relationships. Achieving post-formal thought demands years of geographic and social exposure to opposing ideas. Society must grant young adults this extended emerging phase because the brain requires a vast amount of localized data to build this advanced cognitive architecture. While the brain builds that internal architecture, emerging adults are forced to navigate highly fragmented external systems. The first is the modern higher education complex. This balance scale shows the brutal ledger of modern higher education. On one side, college builds high cognitive flexibility and autonomous vocational identity. On the liability side, 65% of graduates carry student debt, averaging between $28,650 and $56,000 for undergraduates alone. That economic pressure is mirrored in their emotional lives by the modern courtship funnel, a highly fragmented landscape dominated by non-committal relational options. This flowchart maps participation: 70% in hookup culture, 60% in friends with benefits, and 20% on dating apps. Yet surveys reveal a divergence. 65% of women and 45% of men in these arrangements explicitly hope they transition into committed relationships. When individuals fail to successfully navigate these combined economic and relational pressures, they risk falling into the NEET gap, neither employed nor in education or training. Currently, 13% of youth aged 15 to 29 occupy this vulnerable demographic. This phase functions as a high-stakes structural gauntlet, requiring immense cognitive and emotional adaptation to survive these competing economic and relational pressures. As individuals navigate out of that gauntlet, and cross the threshold of middle adulthood around age 40, a series of inescapable biological changes begin to force a profound psychological reevaluation. One of the first universal markers of reducing physical efficiency is presbyopia, the hardening of the eye's lens and cornea. This image demonstrates exactly how this physiological shift alters sensory perception. To a middle-aged adult with presbyopia, printed text becomes blurred, forcing them to hold reading materials further away just to focus. Concurrently, cellular elasticity drops, and women experience the onset of menopause, marking the permanent cessation of reproduction. These physical signs strip away the illusion of permanent youth. The visible reality of aging prompts a psychological urgency to get one's life into permanent order. Popular culture routinely frames this biological transition as the trigger for a destructive, erratic midlife crisis. Developmental psychologist Erik Erikson identified the true internal mechanic at work here. Middle adulthood is structured by the conflict of generativity versus stagnation. This pathway map illustrates the two outcomes. Generativity is the pro-social drive to mentor the next generation and contribute to society. Stagnation is the precise opposite, a retreat into self-absorption, driven by the perception that one has failed to attain their earlier ambitions. Individuals who successfully resolve this conflict achieve the developmental virtue of care. Empirical data confirms that instead of a crisis, the vast majority of middle-aged people report stabilized mental health and higher self-esteem during this phase than ever before. The data also dismantles the secondary myth of inevitable adult cognitive decay. K. Warner Shai's longitudinal psychometric studies tracked intelligence deep into adulthood. This graph of Shai's data tracks 5 primary mental abilities, including numerical facility and inductive reasoning. Rather than a steep drop, the data reveals a plateau effect. These faculties remain highly functional and remarkably stable well past age 67. Modern demographic and cognitive data reveals a lifespan defined by extended stability, where the integration of emotional regulation and practical reasoning creates a trajectory of sustained intellectual and social growth.